Now let's delve into the presidential candidacy scenario of Han Duck-soo, the acting president, which seems to be practically confirmed. Let's begin News Tracker with Choi Don-hee from the National Assembly team. Reporter Choi, acting President Han Duck-soo likely will resign this week to announce his candidacy. Currently, there's talk that his schedule focuses on that very goal.
I've outlined his schedule for this week. Tomorrow, there's a scheduled cabinet meeting, and the day after he's considering a meeting with the U.S. Secretary of the Navy. March 3rd is the People Power Party convention, and the next day is the deadline for public officials to resign. As acting president, the strategy is to veto the bill concerning the appointment during the Constitutional Court reorganization, which was a reason for impeachment, thereby securing legal legitimacy, and to highlight an image as a key U.S. counterpart and trade expert through meetings with top U.S. officials. This also seems to be a strategy to avoid clashing with the People Power Party's primary schedule and maximize the convention effect of his candidacy.
Yes, as you mentioned, the schedule is strategically crafted to optimize what we often speak about as the impactful convention effect. What I'm curious about is how acting President Han will unify with the People Power Party's candidate. He's not joining the People Power Party, right?
Yeah, that's right. As you saw earlier, despite the excitement around the primaries, many point out that this isn't the final round, but more like the semi-finals. This is because the People Power Party's candidate will have to unify again with acting President Han, who is outside the party. The question is how this will be decided, as each candidate has different views. Generally, there is consensus that this needs to be resolved quickly. This is to minimize the aftermath of the primary and the tight presidential election schedule. Considering Han's competitiveness in the main election, there's a belief that proposing a relatively straightforward unification method would be advantageous in the party's primary.
To unify, it seems the four People Power Party candidates must agree, but don't they have differing positions, right? Currently, there are distinctions in their views and attitudes, but candidates Kim Moon-soo and Hong Chun-pyo are aligned in method.
It's a quick, no-objection, so-called one-shot primary method, like the 2002 presidential election model with Roh Moo-hyun and Chung Mong-chun.
We still believe it was the right call to fully accept the results of the public opinion poll.
It's a similar move to block the frontrunner and unite trailing candidates. They're also eyeing a Big Tent alliance with Lee Nak-yeon and Lee Chun-suk. A leader from the People Power Party mentioned that after unifying through a national primary, further unification might not happen, and instead, discussions could lead to an electoral alliance.
Yeah, like you said, those who oppose the impeachment are on the same page and agree. So what's the vibe among the pro-impeachment candidates?
Interestingly, both candidates are indeed pro-impeachment, focusing on moderate expansion in their campaign strategies. They believe that if they push too hard for unification, it might detrimentally weaken their competitiveness. An important consideration is that the presidential candidate who is chosen will obtain full command of the party, which could either hasten or slow down the unification process, depending on that specific individual.
Time is running out. We need to register the candidates by the 11th, so the schedule is quite tight. What do you think?
That's why next week is being called the golden time for candidate unification. For the People Power Party, it's ideal to finalize the candidate and achieve unification before the registration deadline on the 11th. After the 11th, it's impossible to change the party's presidential candidate. Ultimately, Han would have to register as an independent candidate first, then unify with the People Power Party's candidate later. But there are issues with this. Campaign funding and candidate numbers are key. Before unification, the independent candidate cannot use the party's campaign funds, and their candidate number may end up being lower. This is why both the People Power Party and Han are eager to accelerate the unification process. A People Power Party official mentioned that even before the primary is over, discussions about unification are already emerging from the leadership for this reason.
It seems like the leadership has stepped in due to the tight timeline, candidates' numbers, and financial issues. Thank you for the insightful explanation today. I appreciate it.